Emma sat in her living room, her body curled against the edge of the sofa as the rain beat steadily against the windows. It was one of those cold autumn nights when the world outside looked gray and heavy. Yet inside her house, the silence felt even heavier. The glow of a single lamp lit the corner of the room, casting long shadows on the walls. She had made herself a cup of tea earlier, but it had gone cold on the table, untouched. Her mind was elsewhere. She tried reading a book, but the words blurred before her eyes. She tried turning on the television, but every channel felt empty. She even tried scrolling through her phone, but the constant stream of cheerful faces, smiling couples, and endless posts about love and togetherness made her heart ache more. She put the phone face down, unable to bear it anymore. The truth was, Emma had grown used to her loneliness. At least, that's what she told herself. She had convinced herself that evenings like this, quiet, uneventful, and solitary, were easier than dealing with heartbreak. Easier than letting someone in and risking being let down again. She repeated those words to herself often, almost like a shield. But the shield had cracks, and tonight, those cracks were wide open. She leaned her head back against the sofa cushion and closed her eyes. The sound of the storm outside carried her back to memories she tried hard to push away. She remembered when storms never scared her because someone else was always beside her. A familiar hand, a steady voice. Someone who used to whisper, "It's just rain. Nothing to fear." But that someone was gone, and with them all the comfort of belonging. Emma let out a long breath and rubbed her temples. She was tired not just from the day, but from the weight of carrying herself alone through so many nights. The walls of the house seemed to echo back her silence, and even though she had the radio playing softly in the kitchen, it wasn't enough to hide how empty the house really was. She glanced at the clock. Almost 9. Too early to sleep, too late to call anyone. Most of her friends had their own lives, their families, their routines. She didn't want to be the one who interrupted, the one who reminded others she was still here, waiting for someone to ask how she was doing. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, and Emma instinctively pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She hated storms, had hated them since she was a child. They made the world feel unsafe, unpredictable. She tried to steady her breathing, tried to remind herself it was just weather, nothing more. But the truth was, the sound of thunder only amplified her loneliness. She stood and walked toward the window, pressing her palm gently against the cool glass. Outside, the street was nearly deserted, rain pouring down in thick sheets under the yellow glow of the streetlights. The trees swayed and bent, their branches clawing at the night. The world looked restless, unsettled. And somehow it matched her mood perfectly. Emma whispered to herself without thinking, almost like a prayer, "I wish someone was here." The words slipped out so quietly she barely heard them, but once spoken, they echoed inside her like a confession. She wanted someone, not just anyone, but someone who knew her. Someone who could see past the smile she showed others and into the quiet ache she carried. She shook her head, embarrassed even though no one was around. She picked up her tea, took a small sip despite its coldness, set it down again. She told herself not to think like that. She had chosen her path, chosen solitude. She should accept it. Another crack of thunder startled her. And at that exact moment, a sharp sound broke the rhythm of the storm. A knock. Emma froze. At first, she thought she had imagined it. Maybe it was just the branches hitting the side of the house. Maybe it was the storm playing tricks on her. But then it came again. 3 firm knocks. Slow, intentional. Her heart skipped. She wasn't expecting anyone. No one ever came by unannounced anymore. She hadn't ordered food, and her neighbors rarely visited. For a brief second, her mind raced through possibilities. Was it a delivery mistake? Someone stranded in the storm? Or worse, someone she didn't want to see at all? She stood very still, listening. The storm outside muffled every sound, but she was certain now. Someone was at her door. Emma's pulse quickened as she walked toward the hallway. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her house, which just moments ago had felt too quiet, now seemed alive with tension. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floor under her feet. The whisper of the wind, all of it felt louder, sharper. When she reached the door, she hesitated. She placed her hand on the doorknob but didn't turn it right away. She swallowed hard, her breath shallow. 1,000 thoughts rushed through her mind. Should she open it? Should she pretend she wasn't home? The knock came again, softer this time, almost careful. Emma's chest tightened. Whoever it was, they weren't leaving. Slowly she turned the handle. The latch clicked, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. She pulled the door open just enough to see in, then the breath caught in her throat. Her world, which had been so quiet and predictable, shifted in an instant. Because standing on her doorstep, soaked by the rain, was a face she never thought she would see again. Rain poured heavily, streaming down the porch roof and dripping onto the man standing there. Emma's hand tightened on the door as her eyes locked on his face. For a second, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. That loneliness had finally made her imagine what she wanted most. But no, the tall figure, the familiar eyes, the nervous half-smile, he was real. "Daniel?" she whispered, barely able to push his name past her lips. He stood still, water dripping from his hair, jacket clinging to him. He looked older, more worn than she remembered, but nothing could hide the familiar lines of his face. His eyes, those piercing blue eyes, still carried the warmth that had once made her feel safe. Yet they also carried something new, something heavier. Regret, Emma. His voice cracked, low and uncertain, as if saying her name might shatter the fragile moment. "I know I shouldn't be here." Her breath hitched. Memories surged forward, late-night talks, mornings filled with laughter, then the long silence that followed their breakup. The last time she saw him, his back was turned, walking away, leaving her in tears. That image had lived with her for months. And now, here he was, back on her doorstep in the middle of a storm. Her mind screamed to close the door, to protect herself. But her heart didn't move. She just stared at him, caught between anger and longing. Daniel shifted uneasily, shivering slightly as the rain ran down his face. "I couldn't stay away tonight. Something told me I had to come." Emma gripped the door tighter. Part of her wanted to demand answers right there, to ask why he thought he had any right to appear after disappearing for so long. Another part of her wanted to step forward, wrap him in warmth, and pretend the months of pain had never happened. Instead, her voice came out steady, though quiet. "You're soaked. Come inside before you freeze." The words surprised even her, but once spoken, she stepped back, giving him space. Daniel hesitated, eyes searching hers for permission beyond the words. When she didn't take them back, he stepped inside. The sound of the storm dulled as the door closed, leaving the two of them in the dim glow of her living room. Daniel stood awkwardly by the entryway, dripping water onto the floor, as if afraid to move further. Emma grabbed a towel from the hallway and handed it to him, without a word. Their fingers brushed lightly as he took it, and that brief touch sent a rush of emotions through her. "Thank you," he murmured, drying his hair, his voice softer than she remembered. Emma folded her arms, keeping distance. "Why are you here, Daniel? After all this time?" He looked down, avoiding her eyes. "I've asked myself that 1,000 times. I don't have a perfect answer. But when the storm started tonight, I thought of you. I remembered how you always hated thunderstorms. And I couldn't stand the thought of you sitting here alone, afraid." Her chest tightened. He remembered. Even after months apart, he remembered something so small, so intimate. It unsettled her. "That doesn't explain everything," she said quickly, trying to keep control of her voice. "You left, Daniel. You left when I needed you most." His eyes lifted then, filled with sorrow. "I know, and I regret it every single day. I thought leaving was the right thing, that I was protecting you from me, from my mistakes. But I was wrong. Walking away didn't protect you, it just broke us both." Emma's throat tightened. She didn't want to cry, Not in front of him, not now. You think you can just show up here, say sorry, and fix everything? No, he said quickly, shaking his head. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything, Emma. I just needed to see you. I needed to know if you were okay. She studied him in the lamplight, seeing both the man she had loved and the stranger who had hurt her. His clothes clung to him, his hair dripping onto the floor, but his eyes never wavered. There was no arrogance in him now. No excuses, only a man who looked like he'd been carrying too much weight for too long. Silence filled the room, broken only by the crackle of thunder outside. Emma's heart pounded, fighting itself. She wanted to push him away, remind him of all the nights she had cried alone. Yet something in his presence softened her. After all this time, he still knew how to reach the part of her that longed for comfort. Sit down, she said finally, pointing toward the sofa. Daniel nodded gratefully and lowered himself onto the edge, careful, as though afraid to disturb the space. Emma sat across from him, leaving a safe distance, arms wrapped tightly around herself. He looked around the room, his gaze pausing on little things that still carried memories. The framed photo on the shelf, the blanket they had bought together on a winter trip, the books they once read side by side. She saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes. It's the way the past seemed to sit heavily between them. I've missed this, Daniel said quietly, almost to himself. Just being in the same room with you, Emma's heart twisted. She didn't want to admit she had missed it too. She leaned back, trying to sound steady. You can't just come back and pretend nothing happened. I know, he said again, his voice breaking slightly. I'm not here to erase the past, okay? I'm here because I can't keep running from it. I can't keep running from you. Her breath caught. The honesty in his words shook her, made it harder to cling to anger. She wanted to resist, to hold her walls firm, but deep inside something fragile stirred hope, unwanted but persistent. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in months. She saw not the man who left, but the man she had once trusted with her whole heart. And now, sitting in her living room with a storm raging outside, she realized one undeniable truth. The story between them wasn't finished. Emma didn't say it out loud, but she felt it. And from the way Daniel's eyes searched hers, desperate and vulnerable, she knew he felt it too. The storm outside roared louder, shaking the windows. Inside, silence thickened. But it wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore. It was the silence before something important. The silence that held both danger and possibility. Emma's pulse raced as she tried to decide what came next. The storm outside had not eased. It raged as if demanding attention, but inside Emma's living room, a different kind of tension simmered. Daniel sat across from her, careful not to touch anything, as if entering her home after so long required permission. The flickering lamplight danced across his face, highlighting the faint lines of exhaustion he tried to hide. Emma couldn't stop noticing them. He had changed time, and worry had left marks, but the core of him, the one she remembered, was still there. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain hammering against the windows and the occasional clap of thunder. Emma kept her eyes on the rim of her teacup, pretending to sip, though it had long gone cold. Daniel's gaze shifted to the same cup, then to her hands folded in her lap, as though memorizing her every movement. Finally, he broke the silence. Emma, I need to say something. His voice was low, careful, trembling slightly. She lifted her eyes to meet his, wary. I'm listening, she said cautiously, not wanting to betray the mixture of anger and longing she felt. I shouldn't have left, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought walking away was the right choice. I thought I was protecting you. But I was wrong. I was only protecting myself from my own fear. Emma's chest tightened. She had imagined hearing these words 1,000 times. But now, in the quiet of her living room, with the storm outside, it felt different. It felt real and painful. She wanted to speak to tell him that months of waiting, crying, and questioning her worth had left scars. But her voice faltered. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "I've thought about you every single day," he confessed, his eyes pleading for her to understand. "I've tried to convince myself I could move on, that I could be someone else, somewhere else, but it never worked. Nothing was right when you weren't there." Emma's mind raced. The words were everything she had wanted to hear, yet they cut into her like a knife. She remembered the nights she had cried alone, the silence that had screamed back at her, the emptiness of the apartment when she returned from work. And now, here he was, soaked from the rain, looking vulnerable, asking for a place in her heart again. "You hurt me, Daniel," she said finally, her voice steady but heavy. "You left me when I needed you most. And do you know what it did to me? Do you know how many nights I sat alone wishing you would come back?" "I know," he said quickly, almost desperately. "I know, Emma. I've punished myself every day for leaving you. I've carried the weight of it. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm only asking, can I start over, even if just tonight?" Emma blinked, trying to process the flood of emotions. Part of her wanted to run, to slam the door and reclaim her solitude. Another part, the part that had whispered into empty rooms, that had missed his laughter and warmth, wanted to reach across the space between them and let the past melt away. The storm outside seemed to echo the turmoil in her chest, clashing and roaring as if nature itself understood the tension between them. Emma's eyes searched his, and she saw no arrogance, no excuses, only raw honesty. He was here, unguarded, offering himself fully, flaws and all. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. "Do you understand what it takes to earn trust again?" she asked. "It's not easy. It's not something you just fix with words." Daniel nodded solemnly. "I know. I'm not asking for everything back at once. I just want to show you that I've changed, that I remember, that I care, that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." Emma's hands fidgeted in her lap. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him, but the memories of abandonment were sharp and lingering. Yet, as she looked at him, she noticed the subtle changes in his expression, the way his shoulders slumped, the way his gaze never wavered, the small tremor in his hands. He was sincere, more sincere than she had ever seen him before. "I don't know if I can just forget," she admitted, her voice softening. "I don't know if I can pretend it didn't hurt." But she hesitated. The words caught somewhere between caution and hope. "Maybe I can try to understand why you're here now." Daniel's lips curved into a small, hopeful smile. "That's all I ask. Just understanding. It's just a chance to be here, to talk, to try again. I don't want to rush anything. Just want to be with you, even if it's only a step at a time." Emma's heart thumped loudly in her chest. She could feel the tension in the room, the fragile thread of connection being rewoven. She remembered the way he had laughed in the kitchen while they cooked together, the way he held her hand when she was anxious, the way he had comforted her during storms when she was a child. And despite everything, that part of her that loved him still existed, still remembered, still hoped. "Daniel, it's not just about showing up," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "It's about proving that what happened won't happen again, that leaving me, walking away, that won't be part of the story anymore." "I understand," he replied immediately. "And I swear it won't. I've learned. I've grown. And I'll spend every day showing you that I mean it." Emma's chest ached. She didn't know if she could fully trust him yet, but she could feel a shift, a small opening where the walls around her heart had hardened. She could feel the faint warmth of hope returning. Delicate but undeniable. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe a little easier. She didn't reach for his hand. Not yet, but she didn't pull away either. That silence, heavy, tense, yet full of possibility, was enough for now. Daniel glanced at her, noticing the subtle change, the softening of her posture. "I'm here, Emma," he said gently. "I'm not leaving. Not tonight. "Not ever again if you let me stay." The storm outside continued its relentless rhythm, but inside a quiet warmth began to settle. Emma's eyes met his again, searching for truth, searching for the honesty in his words and the sincerity in his gaze. And in that moment, she realized something important. This conversation, this moment, could change everything. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if forgiveness was possible or if trust could truly be rebuilt. But she knew one thing: Daniel was here, vulnerable, honest, and ready to fight for a place in her life. And that realization, fragile as it was, stirred something in her that she hadn't felt in months: hope. Emma leaned back slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "Then we'll start with tonight," she whispered. Daniel's expression softened, relief and gratitude mingling in his eyes. He nodded slowly, careful not to break the fragile thread of trust being woven between them. And for the first time in a long time, they both felt the possibility of something new, something real, something worth holding on to, growing quietly in the space between them. The storm outside raged on. But inside, a different storm had passed. One of walls breaking down, of hearts opening, of a conversation that had begun the process of healing and rediscovery. Emma didn't know what would come next, but she knew that tonight nothing would be the same again. The storm outside showed no signs of slowing. Rain lashed against the windows, lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled like distant drums. Inside, however, Emma's living room was quiet, almost sacred. The tension that had been building all evening seemed to settle into something fragile but undeniable. Daniel sat across from her, eyes fixed on her hands as though measuring every heartbeat, every small movement. Emma's pulse raced, each thump echoing the storm outside. They hadn't touched. Not yet. And yet, the space between them buzzed with unspoken words and emotions that had lain dormant for months. Emma felt at first the tug of memory, the warmth of familiarity, the tiny flutter of hope that had been smothered by months of loneliness and hurt. She tried to steady her breathing, tried to remind herself that trust wasn't rebuilt in a single night, that hearts were fragile and mistakes couldn't be erased with words alone. But Daniel's presence made the reminders fade. The sound of his voice, the tilt of his head, the way he watched her so intently, all demanded her attention, demanded her heart. "Emma," he said softly, breaking the silence. His voice was low, careful, almost trembling. "I know I've asked a lot tonight. I know I don't deserve your trust right away. But I want to be here. I want to stay. And I want you to know that I won't leave again." Her hands clenched in her lap. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance, but the fear lingered, the fear of being hurt again, of letting someone in only to have them vanish. Yet every part of her that had missed him, every memory of laughter and comfort, every long night spent wishing for this moment, urged her forward. "Daniel," she whispered, voice barely audible over the rain. "It's not that simple. You can't erase the past with promises. I've waited so long and I've been hurt. You have to understand that." "I do," he said immediately, leaning slightly closer. "I understand more than you know. I can't change what happened, Emma. I can't undo the nights you spent alone or the tears you cried. But I can try. I can be here for you now and every day after this if you let me." Her chest tightened. She studied his face, searching for honesty, searching for the truth in his words. She saw it. Every tremor in his hands, every careful movement, every unguarded glance, it was real. He was not here to manipulate or to demand. He was here to ask humbly for a second chance. Emma took a deep breath, letting the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. She remembered the warmth of his hand on hers, the laughter they had shared, the comfort of his presence. And in that memory, she found the courage to let her heart respond, even if just a little. Daniel noticed the change instantly. He reached out slowly, placing his hand near hers, careful not to touch but offering the possibility. His eyes searched hers, asking silently if she was willing to meet him halfway. Emma's hand trembled as it hovered over his prod. If she closed her eyes for a moment, letting the storm inside her mind settle, letting the memories of loss and longing wash over her and settle gently like rain-soaked leaves. Finally, she placed her hand over his. Just a touch. No words, no promises, only presence. The simple gesture sent a wave of warmth through both of them. Daniel's lips curved into a small, relieved smile, and he looked at her as if he could finally breathe again. For a moment, they just sat there, hands touching lightly, hearts beating in rhythm, the storm outside forgotten. Emma realized that love was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was in a hand held, in a look shared. In the willingness to try again, Daniel, she said softly, opening her eyes. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if trust can be fully restored. But I want to try. I want to see where this goes. Relief and gratitude washed over his face. That's all I need, Emma. That's all I've ever needed. Just a chance. They leaned slightly closer, the gap shrinking, until their foreheads nearly touched. The storm outside raged on, but inside the room felt warmer, safer. The electricity of rain and thunder couldn't compete with the electricity of connection that had been reignited between them. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. They didn't speak. Words were unnecessary now. Their eyes said what words could not. They were tentative, careful, yet filled with the promise of something new. Something stronger than fear, stronger than past mistakes. Emma realized she had been waiting for this, not just Daniel's return, but the chance to forgive, to rebuild, to feel safe again with someone she loved. And she wanted to embrace it, even if it was scary. Daniel finally broke the silence, his voice soft but steady. Emma, thank you for letting me stay, for letting me try. I know I don't deserve it, but I promise I'll spend every day proving that I do. She squeezed his hand lightly, a silent acknowledgement of her own willingness to let him in. The warmth of their touch spread through her, filling the empty spaces that had ached for so long. She allowed herself to imagine a future where laughter returned to these walls, where shared mornings and evenings weren't just memories but reality once again. Outside, the storm began to soften, the rain easing to a gentle patter against the windows. It felt like a reflection of their hearts' turbulent moments giving way to calm, clarity, and the possibility of renewal. Emma's lips curved into a small smile, the first genuine one in months. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, she had Daniel, and that was enough. The past could be acknowledged, but it didn't have to define them anymore. They had chosen to face the storm together, to take the first step toward rebuilding something precious. She looked at him, and in that gaze they shared an unspoken promise to move forward carefully, to honor what they had lost and to cherish what they could rebuild. It was fragile, it was tentative, but it was real. Daniel leaned back slightly, but didn't let go of her hand. No matter what happens, he whispered, I'll be here. I won't leave again. Emma's heart fluttered, a mix of relief, hope, and longing. She whispered back, I believe you, and I'll be here too. We'll figure this out. Together. The storm had passed outside, leaving the world wet and glistening, washed clean. Inside, the quiet room was filled with something stronger than the storm connection. Trust and a fragile but growing love. And in that moment, Emma realized that sometimes the most unexpected visitors could bring the most unexpected gifts. A chance to heal, a chance to forgive, and a chance to love again. For the first time in months, she felt truly seen, truly safe, and truly alive. And as they sat together, hands intertwined, the rain outside no longer mattered. They had each other, and that was enough to face anything the future might hold.